Hello, everybody. I was attacked by a cat while I was off screen. So first off, welcome to everyone out there in internet world, and a very, very special welcome to Andrea Stewart, who I absolutely adore, and I'm so super excited that. Sorry, another cat is knocking stuff over. Can you move, please? Let's go over there. There we go. Super excited that she is here today because I absolutely adore her first book, which was The Bone Shard Daughter. If you happen to be a member of the Fantastic Strangelings, we already read this one because it was fantastic and wonderful. And now the Bone Shard Emperor, Hunter S. Tomcat, is trying to help me here. This is coming out on November the 23rd. So that's when your book will be shipped to you. It's also going to have, your book plate. It also has some like super cute stickers, and you get all sorts of fun stuff. So welcome, Andrea.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh my gosh. I am, so sorry. He is enormous. I am so excited to be talking to you because when the first book came out, for some reason you didn't make it to our Zoom because you were like, I've got to go into labor and like have a child. So first off, how dare you? Secondly, how are you? How's your child? How's your quarantine?
Oh, she's great. She's a year old now and walking around. I'm pregnant again. so having a second pandemic baby in all likelihood, we'll see.
Okay, so in the time that I have done nothing, you have come up with 2 books, working on the third, and 2 babies. You are winning the quarantine. Good job.
I'm trying my best.
So I thought, let's see if we could start with like a small reading from your new book. I think you had like a little taste that you could give us.
I do. Okay, so here's the hardcover. I just got it recently in the mail. I'm very excited about it. So I'm going to read from not quite halfway. It's not too spoilery. There is a fight scene that gets a little awkward, and that's all the context that I'll give you. Okay, so this is chapter 18, Lynn, Rhea Island. Thrana screeched again, and fear lanced through me, white hot as a lightning bolt. I barely felt the ground meeting my feet as I ran to the entrance hall and up the palace stairs. I wasn't sure what I'd do when I got there. I carried no weapons. I just knew that I couldn't let anything happen to her. I burst through the door to my rooms. Something struck me on the side, carrying me to the ground. Someone was on top of me, his face swathed in dark cloth, a knife glinting in his hands. My bones hummed with energy. I slammed a hand at the assassin's wrist and saw the blade go skittering away. And then Jovis was lifting the assassin off me, his face enraged. He threw him to the side and his body struck one of the chairs in my sitting room. The assassin groaned but rolled to his knees. Thrana. I caught glimpses of movement as I thrust myself to my feet. One more assassin circling Mephi and Thrana. Only Mephi was fighting back. Even though Thrana was larger, she shrank away, letting out pitiful shrieks each time he tried to strike. Mephi's muzzle was bloodied, though I couldn't be sure if that was his blood or one of the assassins. I kicked the door behind me shut. I can help, I said to Jovis, my voice low. I'm the captain of the Imperial Guard, Jovis said. I'm supposed to protect you. I flexed my fingers, thinking of the power I demonstrated earlier when I'd pulled the water droplets inside. It had surprised him that I'd been able to do so much. You can't protect me if you are dead, and I'm not as helpless as everyone thinks I am. Besides, you really shouldn't be trying to tell me what to do. He'd seen me in the hallway, bloody from the battle with my father, but victorious. He knew better than anyone that I could hold my own. Jovis gave me a quick glance, then pulled a dagger from his belt. He tossed it to me, and I caught it by the hilt. I'll take the one on the right, he said. Can you handle the other? I felt the strength flow through my limbs, stronger even than when I'd eaten the cloud juniper berries. There was no one here to care if I let loose with my newfound magic. All the fear I'd felt turned to molten anger. Yes, they dared to come here and to attack Thrana instead of me. My fingers tightened around the dagger. I lifted it. But instead of charging at the assassin on the left, I let my awareness sharpen. I felt the moisture in the room and outside the window. It was as easy as it had been when Jovis had first shown me. I gathered the droplets, felt them coalesce into a pool at my feet. And then, just as the assassin charged at me, I lifted it to slam into his face. The assassin choked, nearly dropping his weapon. I stepped inside his guard and sliced my dagger across his ribs. I'd cut enough flesh when I'd been learning my father's bone shard magic. This felt no different, only the blood was warm this time. He leapt back, pressing a hand to the wound. Jovis had broken a chair leg clean off and was using it to bludgeon the assassin on the right. My opponent had underestimated me, but was quickly recovering. Jovis's opponent dodged his attacks, keeping his blade at the ready. I backed away, looking for a defensible position. So it was I found my back against Jovis's, my dagger raised, Thorana at my side. She found her courage again with my presence, and I felt the rumble of her growl as she leaned against my knee. Both assassins attacked. The Alonga that had attacked me back on Imperial had been relying on the element of surprise. These two men were well-trained fighters, moving with the fluidity of dancers. The man I faced bobbed and dodged, unwilling to engage me directly. He knew my strength and speed now. Instead, he searched for an opening, feinting with his blade. I felt Jovis's presence at my back as he swung, his shoulder brushing briefly against mine. I gathered more water from outside as I ducked a blow, and Thorana snapped at the assassin's heels. The assassin eyed the pool of water I gathered. I knew what he thought, that I'd throw it in his face again, choking off his breath. Instead, I sent a small flick of it toward his face, and the rest hurtling toward his knees in a wave. He dodged the water aimed at his head, but overbalanced and fell as the wave struck his legs. Thorana darted forward, burying her teeth in the man's arm. He dropped his blade, trying to break Thorana's grip. Jovis grunted. I whipped about to find the other assassin's blade embedded in Jovis's chair leg. Before the man could recover, I crouched beneath Jovis's upraised arm and cut a split up the assassin's abdomen. It was easier to kill than I'd expected. It was still just flesh waiting to be carved. My blade dripped onto the floor. As I said, Jovis's eyes narrowed and he turned, nearly knocking me over. He swung his makeshift club and the embedded dagger caught the other assassin in the face. The hilt slammed into the assassin's temple with a crack. He'd shaken off Thorana, though his arm was limp and his blade was in his other hand. He'd been about to stab me in the back. My heartbeat pounded in my ears, echoing the drumming of the rain on the roof. Jovis and I stood there for a moment, shivering, our legs entangled from both our hasty pivots, our shoulders pressed together. My gaze met his, our breathing evenly matched. I found myself fixated on his parted lips. I'd once thought him unremarkable, and now I couldn't look away. I wasn't sure what I wanted more, for him to step away or for him to stay. His free hand reached out, covering mine. I held my breath. The dagger, he said, his words warm by my ear. Someone will come. It took me a moment to register what he meant. Of course, I wanted to sink into the floor below that, and then into the cold, wet earth. I was Lynn. I was the emperor, and I was an idiot. So that's a little taste of book 2.
Sorry. You couldn't hear me laughing, but I was. It was awesome. Oh my gosh. Oh, I am so excited. That is just a little bit okay, yes, I'll keep petting you. That is just a little bit beyond where I am. So I'm like, whoa, I'm so excited. I want you to read the whole thing to me. That was awesome. So I forgot to mention, if you do have questions, put them in the Q&A. I've got some questions too, but we will get to your questions. So put them in there if you see them. I'm gonna start really quickly first with, we always do these a few small questions that we ask everybody. And so let's see, what is your favorite word?
It's pulchritudinous. So it's one of those words that sounds terrible, but means like otherworldly beautiful. And I've tried over and over again to use it in my writing. And unfortunately, I just can't make it work because of the way it sounds.
It doesn't sound pretty, but I love that
it
is. And what is a book that you think everyone should read that not enough people have?
Oh gosh. So I'm just going to go with what I'm in the middle of right now. So I'm in the middle of the Greenbone saga. So the first one is Jade City. I'd highly recommend it. It's like this sweeping family drama that is set in like a modern alternate world, and that there's Jade that's magic. Uh, and it's extremely tense and interesting. I'm on the second one, and there was a scene that I was listening to while I was taking a shower, and I just kind of stared off into the distance for a while because it was affecting me so much. But yeah, it's actually in production to be a television show too, so I would definitely recommend that.
Awesome. Okay, adding it to my list. Where would you be 2 weeks after the zombie apocalypse?
I would probably be somewhere out in the country, holed up with my cats, and like with a concrete fence and chickens. I mean, that's what I would hope that I would be. I would probably be dead, uh, but a person can dream.
Exactly. And how do you like your eggs?
Oh gosh. Oh, like a lot of different ways. Probably most often like scrambled with vegetables. I really like that.
Perfect. And will you be my friend?
Yes.
Okay, good. Those are our first ones. Okay, so let's talk about these books. So what inspired this whole story?
So the Bone Shard Daughter, actually, I had the seed of the idea a really long time ago. I was out to lunch with some other writer friends of mine, and my friend Marina Lostetter went to this not so great place, and we were in a food court. And she almost choked on the shard of bone that was in her food that wasn't supposed to be in there. And I started thinking to myself, like, oh, like, what if bone shards were magic? So that was kind of the very, very beginning of it. My friends all joke now that one of them has to suffer a near-death experience for me to have my next story idea. I hope that's not true. But yeah, that was kind of the start of it. And then there were like some concepts that I knew I wanted to write into a story. Like I knew I wanted to have constructs in the story. I knew I wanted to have an empire that was on the brink of revolution. I knew I wanted to have like a palace of locked doors. And I knew I wanted to have an animal companion because I love reading those books.
Me too. So did you, I mean, you're working on book 3 now. Did you know, like, start in book 1 and book 2? Did you already know, like, oh, I know how I want it to end, or does the story like find you as you're writing it?
Oh, I definitely knew how I wanted it all to end. I think when I started book 2, I was still trying to figure out exactly where the characters ended up at the end of book 3. I had like an idea, but I did, when we went out on submission to publishers, I did have to write a little summary of what happened in book 2 and what happened in book 3. Those did not include the ending. So they were just like little teasers.
Uh,
That has remained the same. But yeah, I mean, especially right now working on book 3, I have a very clear idea of where I want it to end. It's just kind of making the pieces fit together and make sense.
Makes sense. Yes, yes. So you, the way that you write with the different points of view, there's Lynn and there's Jovis and there's, I'm not going to say these names right, but in my head there's Faloo and Sand. And um, when I first started, I was like, this is going to be too complicated. There's too many islands. There's going to be too many people. Because I get very overwhelmed really easily. And about 3 pages in, I was like, I'm 100% in. Um, how do you find, like, the characters' voices are so unique. Like, even if I didn't look at the top, like in particular Jovis, because he has like this anti-hero humor, like your character voices are so unique, which I think is so difficult. Um, is there a particular way that you deal with that?
Uh, well, gosh, it's like one of those things where I think like people think I'm a lot more organized than I am. I'm extremely haphazard. It's terrible. I mean, when I work on each like characters, chapters, I mean, I don't work on them. I work on them in order mostly, so I can kind of switch back and forth. But I do try to kind of get in the head of the character, and a lot of them kind of have like, aspects of my personality. So it's like not too difficult. Like, Jovis is constantly like frustrated with himself and he thinks he's really funny. And like, that's like part of who I am, and like Lynn is always trying to live up to her father's expectations. And she's always like a little bit frustrated by the people around her. And, I feel like we all can relate to that as well. So I try to think about like who they are and where they're at, and really kind of make sure that they all have like unique motivations and backgrounds, so that when I go in and write them, they sound like they're different people because they're looking at the world differently. So even like when they're describing things, I try to use metaphors that like the character would use. So, obviously Jovis is like, he's a sailor and, he's like a smuggler. So he's going to be like looking at the world in a certain way. He's a little bit cynical. So, it's like, I try to use little tricks like that. And I try to not make things too complicated, even though they are. I try to kind of just trickle in information as it's like right as it becomes relevant, so people don't feel overwhelmed. I think especially with epic fantasy, you've got all this information in your head that I think sometimes people want to just splash it all over the page. They're like, look at all the research I did, and like, this is my world, and like, let me defend it. So like, this is why it makes sense. But I feel like there's a relationship between the author and the reader where you're trying to build this kind of trust with them, and that means that you have to trust the reader too, and not just have them trust you. So as an author, I try to trust the reader a little bit and not like go in and start explaining everything, because I feel like otherwise it won't make sense.
I love that. And I'm writing that down for my own personal use because that's a really good one. So one of my favorite things when after the first book came out was, talking to different people about, their different takes of the story. And it was interesting because I was like, well, clearly, Jovis and Mephi, like those are the best characters. Those are absolutely, everybody's so excited when they come on. And then I had all these other people who were like, oh no, I love Felu. And I'm like, oh no, I love Ronami, or I love, and I just wondered, like, was there a character? Are they all your favorites, or was there one that particularly that you love writing?
Oh gosh, like every time people ask me that, I'm like, oh, it's like trying to choose a favorite child. you know, because I love all of them in different ways, and I always find it entertaining which characters people relate to more, and which ones they're like, oh, I really don't like this person, because I feel like it reveals a little bit about like who they are. And for me, gosh, I don't know, like I yeah, if you put a gun to my head and told me I had to choose one, I would have to say like it would have to be Jovis, just because I feel like he has like a lot of like my voice in him. And so it's like pretty easy to like dash off some of his observations and everything. Yeah, but that's only if you put a gun to my head, because I really do love all of them.
Yeah, it's interesting. So even in the comments of, people love Ronami. I don't know if I'm saying that right. I thought she was supposed to be less likable in book one. But those were the conversations that were coming up because, for me, I was like, oh, I loved her because she was like difficult, but kind of idealistic. And for me, the first time I've read it many times, but the first time I read it, I was like, oh, I don't really like Felu so much. And then I realized I didn't like her just because I was like, oh, she's having to really learn. She's having to go like, oh, this is the way my entire life was. And I have to realize I'm maybe on the bad side. Maybe I need to change fucking everything. And there's so much like learning that goes on there. Oh, so good. Oh yeah, people are asking, can we discuss spoilers in the chat? I think you absolutely can. Just know if you're watching the chat live, that there may be some spoilers in there. And actually, we're about to get into spoilers anyway, because I'm about to start asking some spoilery questions. So if you haven't finished Bone Shard Daughter, you might want to pause this and come back to it. It'll be on YouTube probably in a day or two. Let's see. So actually this is a very big spoiler. So yeah, I'm gonna go right into the spoilers. You killed my friend. I mean, was it hard to
Which one? Which one? Which one are you talking about? Is it buy-in or buy-in? Yeah.
Oh my gosh, when he died, I was just like, wait, what? No, what happened? Was it hard to make that decision?
So no, but that's because I already I knew that he was gonna die from the beginning. There's it's kind of like, I look at my main characters and I'm like, well, what needs to happen around them for their character development, right?
Yes.
So yeah, unfortunately he was marked for death from the beginning.
Yeah. It's interesting too, as I'm reading, because of the way the bone magic works, and you can bring people back, and you're basically computer hacking but with bones. And so much of this, I'm like, it's so open, and I think that's part of why I like it so much, where I'm like, well, maybe he could come back and maybe this could happen, and what if this? And I have the most ridiculous theories that where I will, and actually here's one of them. My first theory is that maybe all constructs are zombies, because technically a lot of them are back from the dead, right? I mean, is this a zombie book? Can we classify it as a zombie book?
I feel like a little bit. I know some people have asked me, because they're doing book bingo things. They're like, well, can this classify as necromancy? And I was like, yeah, I think she's kind of a necromancer. When you're piecing together dead people, but then it's you're giving them a new, different life. But then there's the whole thing with the memory. So yeah, it's a little bit necromantic,
right? So the excuse me, there's so many different themes in this, in the first book and in the second, and so many that as I'm going through and I'm like, oh, this is and this and this. But I think one of my very favorites is the idea that you can be who you want to be, not who you were born to be, not that we can continue to to learn and to grow, and that we all have this baggage, but that we can find our own agency and individualism even in dark places. And I loved how using that, so much of it goes back to alliances and friends, and who you can trust and who you can't. And I'm halfway finished with the second book, and I'm still like, I don't know, can I trust anyone? Can I trust myself? I don't know. But it's were there particular themes that you wanted to get across?
Definitely the one about identity. I mean, for me, that was really close to my heart. I'm a child of two immigrants. My dad immigrated from Scotland, my mom immigrated from China. And when your parents immigrate over to the US, there's this pressure that hey, we're in the land of opportunity and you have to make the most of it. And as anyone who has an Asian parent knows, there's a lot of pressure to be an engineer, a doctor, or a lawyer, one of those three. So I definitely felt that pressure that I had to be good at math and science, and that like those were the acceptable professions. So like me wanting to be like a writer, and before I also paint, so I was like all into the arts. So like I think like that was something that was very close to me in the sense that I had those like parental expectations, and I did not follow them. I mean, I did study economics, which was like, I think the easiest thing that would still like not shame them. So yeah, but I still like did my writing and my art on the side, and eventually like made it my career, and now they're proud of me. Although there's still the whole thing about like now they keep asking me, when is it going to be a movie, and then when is it going to be translated into Chinese, and I'm like, I don't have much control over this. So there's moving goalposts. But yeah, that was a big one for the first book. I think overall I was thinking about I mean, I write these things a lot because I have these questions, and I don't know the answers, and I'm kind of exploring what does this mean. So one of the things that I was thinking about when I was writing these books is that so often in fantasy, and I'm not saying this is bad because I love it and I read these books all the time, but you have like a monarchy, or in this case an empire, and you have like the bad person in charge, and the conclusion is that the good person is in charge. And to me, I love that because like it's very wish fulfillment, but at the same time I was thinking, well, what does that mean for the good person to be in charge? Like how do you actually change things, and like how do you deal with all of the resistance, and is it even okay for like one person to be in charge like that, like even if they have the best intentions, like what does that mean? So I'm kind of exploring that a lot throughout this entire series. So you see that a lot more in book 2, and then you see that a lot more in book 3. But that was a question that I was kind of grappling with, like who should be in power, and if the person in power is quote unquote good, like what does that mean? I mean, because I feel like things are so much more complicated than that. If you want to go out and do something good, enact a good policy that helps people, it almost always like there's going to be somebody that doesn't like that policy for one reason or another, and they may have perfectly valid reasons, and I don't know I don't know like where the balancing point is there. So I'm kind of like, that's a question that I'm exploring in the series a lot.
Well, I love that. And actually, I love that you said that, because that's like literally on my list of things because I love the idea of, because by the beginning of book 2, you've got these like strong women and they're reshaping the world, and you feel like, all right, the world's in the right hands. And then you realize it's so much more complicated and harder than you think, and that there's not one right way to do something, and there's not one easy way, and it's so easy to fall into using power. And once you use power, even for good ways, are you overusing your power? And is it going to corrupt? And is it manipulation if it is for a good reason? And I love that it's complicated, that there's never a point where I'm like, this person is good and I want them to win. I'm just kind of like, okay, I like this person and I think they've got some good ideas, but also maybe this person does too. And also like, and every island has their own idea and their own background. By the way, I loved, not only the palaces with all the locked the keys, wonderful imagery, but also the idea of the endless sea and the drifting islands that move. Like, I just love that idea of that the empire only paid attention to kind of like, oh, well, this island only got close to us every 5 years. Or I'm so in love with the idea of that whole, I want it to be a movie. I'm with your parents. because
Well,
I
thank
see
you.
it. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I mean, that's like one of the things that I try to do in my writing is like, I feel like with fantasy, a lot of it is like very like Western European castles and knights. And I feel like it's fantasy. We could go so many like more places and be just go way out there and like create an entirely new world. So that was like one of the things I wanted to do is kind of stretch the limits of that.
Well, I loved it. And I loved that it was so, each place was specific enough. Like very often when I'm reading something, and so like Game of Thrones, for example, I had such a hard time because I was like, okay, which place is Westeros? Which place is this? Like, there's so many. And with this, I'm like, oh, no, this island does this. And this island is where this person is from. And this, and I think that's really hard to do with, especially this like epic trilogy. It's not unusual for me around book 2 to be like, I don't know what's happening anymore. And you still have me. So good job.
Yay!
So how do you stay inspired? I mean, you're already working on the third one of these. You're really hitting it out of the park. Like, how do you stay inspired to write this?
I think it's important to take breaks because otherwise you can burn out. And I don't know, I feel like with writing, like the easy part is having ideas. Like I'm always throwing like ideas at my friends and we're always tossing things back and forth like, oh, what about this? This would be really cool. But the hard part is like actually sitting down and writing it. The beginning is always exciting. And then you get to a point where you're like, ooh, I actually need to have a plan. So yeah, it's interesting. I think that the thing that keeps me going is having like a progress bar. This sounds very sad. But I use Scrivener and it's got like you put your word goal in and it has like a progress bar that gets like greener as you get closer to the end. And that's pretty exciting for me. I really like checklists. So I make checklists every day of like what I want to accomplish. And then I like give myself like little rewards. So like I'll have like a little bit of chocolate when I get like this many words, or you know, I'll stop and like bake something. Um, yeah, and I think like for me, just keeping the end goal in mind is always like a driving factor. Like knowing like this is where I want this to end up. This is the feeling that I want to come across. This is how I want like everything to tie together. And I think like that is really that, and like expectations. Oh my God, I'm terrible. Like I feel like if anybody has expectations of me, I feel like I have to like live up to those and then exceed them. So it's like, yeah, it's a complex at this point. But you just knowing that people enjoyed the first book and they're enjoying the second one, it really keeps me going. And I'm like, I gotta really pull it home in the third one because I don't want to disappoint anybody. And then another thing that keeps me going is knowing that I can write something new after this. Because like that's like always the new shiny, right? You know that once you get to the end, you can work on the new shiny that will always seem like it's going to be better before you start writing it, and then it's like always a disaster. But
Yeah. Well, and that actually was my next question is, after the third, but do you already have in mind and the next thing that you want to work on? Is it another book? Is it painting? Is it a break? Is it?
oh well, I mean, I'm gonna have another kid, so
I guess you
there's
can
that.
take a 2 week break for that.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes. And then I do actually have another idea for another trilogy. I haven't pitched it to my publisher yet. I've pitched it to my agent, but it was one of those emails where I was like, blah, here's these ideas. And she was like, sounds great. Here are some questions. And I was like, here's my answers. And she's like, here's some more questions. And I'm like, I don't know how to answer those yet. So, so yeah, so I'm like at that stage. Obviously, like right now, my focus is on finishing book 3. I don't like to get too distracted because I feel like that is my tendency in life is to try to do like, too many things at once. So I'm like, okay, I like that idea and I really want to work on it, but I have to do this first. So that's my reward for finishing book 3 is like sitting down and like doing some more world building and character building for the next series. So yeah, I mean, I'm always going to have something that I want to do next. I do want to continue to make a living at doing this. So there's that part as well.
Awesome. Okay, so we have some really good questions in the Q&A. And also, if you have any questions, drop it in there's a Q&A down at the bottom. And let's see. Okay, so you've talked before about how you got the idea for the bone shard magic. How did you get the idea for the Mephi like animal companion magic system?
So for that was, I knew that I wanted to write an animal companion because that is one of my favorite things when I read fantasy books. And when I was a kid, like I was not allowed to have like a cat or a dog or anything. So I would, I begged, of course I begged. But my mom was like, she just didn't want to live with a furry animal. So like to me, it was like really close to my heart is like having this companion that is always there for you and that you're always there for them. It's like there's something really, really wonderful about that. I mean, I have 2 cats. It was not inspired by either of them. People always ask me because I have one of my cats is a Savannah, which is a hybrid breed, and he's very, very mischievous and excitable, and it's always in my face. So people always ask, like, "Oh, is he inspired by Professor Mochi, who's my cat?" And it's funny enough, like, I actually wrote him before I got my cat. So I joke sometimes I kind of like manifested this creature that's like kind of like Nuffy, but like not as smart and doesn't talk and doesn't have magic. But I know you're asking like, how did I get the idea for that magic system? I don't want to say too much about that because I do have like these underpinnings that are going on in this world that I'm kind of like revealing a little at a time. So there's reasoning for it that I cannot explain at this time.
So
Plead the fifth.
Yes, that's all right. That's totally fine. So as I'm reading the book in my head, Mephi and Thrana are both Pokemon. And in my head, and I know it doesn't match, but it doesn't change the fact that in my head, they are, I'm going to say this wrong because I don't know how to pronounce Pokemon's names, even though I play it, an Entei, which is like this character. That to me is 100% what Mephi looks like. I'm just like, yep, that's it. So there you go. If you need to have, an image that sticks into your head, that's it. Let's see. Another person saying yes, books as movies. They definitely could. Oh, this is a very good question. Were you concerned that the title would give away the main twist of the first book?
That was a concern of mine. I did talk to, I mean, when the publishers asked me like about the title and everything, that was the title that it went out on sub with, and they decided to stick to it. And we had a whole discussion about like, oh, is it too spoilery? And they're like, no, I don't think it is. And that was it, basically. So, I mean, there's a couple different meanings you can take from it. And I know that some people picked up on it earlier than others. But I mean, my goal as an author, I think, is to have people realize the reveal, like either right before it happens or like right after it happens, because I feel like it's fine if they realize it right before it happens, because then you feel smart, and like that's good. I love making you feel smart, and that's wonderful. And then right after, it's like so you can feel like a little bit surprised. So I wasn't terribly concerned. And there's other reveals too. So I'm like, ah.
Well, I was one of the people that didn't get it until it was during the discussion and somebody was like, oh yeah, I figured it out about like halfway through, especially with like the title. And I was like, what do you mean the title? Oh, got it. So yeah, trust me, not everybody got it.
I'm the person that never figures this stuff out until like way late. So
Me too. And then I come up with these like vast conspiracy theories that are not true at all. So yeah, it's ridiculous. Let's see. Oh yeah, same. So your magic system feels a lot like computer programming, hacking. Was that sort of your inspiration?
Yeah, definitely. So I did take a couple computer programming courses when I was in college. And then my husband is a software engineer. And I really wanted to give it that feel where you're going in and you're doing something very complicated. And there are so many easy ways for it to go wrong or for people to get around it in unexpected ways. So my husband works on video games, and sometimes like we talk about like the little weird bugs that come about and like how they happened. So I find that kind of thing really fascinating, because when you think about this kind of thing, you're like, oh, well, you just write these commands and then the construct will do what you told it to. But I think that language is a lot more complicated than that. As soon as you have a language, whether that is a spoken language, a written language, a programming language, like it's fallible. There are ways to get around it. There are ways to misunderstand it. So I really kind of wanted to explore that.
Yes. Let's see. So this is an interesting question. Of your many unpublished novels, which would you most want to give another go of publishing?
Oh gosh. Oh, so for those of you who don't know, The Bone Shard Daughter was like the seventh manuscript that I wrote. I'm very stubborn, and I don't know how to give up. so,
Right.
so I mean, I just kept going. I think I don't think that I want to give any of them like another go at publishing, because I feel like I improve with every book. But there were some themes in the last manuscript that didn't get published that I really liked, that I think I want to explore in future books. Just some themes about like tribalism and how we tend to care a lot more about people who are closer to us than those who seem rather distant, even though maybe that's not the best thing for society. So those are definitely some themes I think I'm going to be exploring in future books. And that I think is kind of how it's going to live on. I don't think that I'm not going to unearth any of those, but I may cannibalize them.
Love it. Let's see. So one thing that I loved about, I agree totally. One thing I loved about The Bone Shard Daughter was that I never once felt like the story paused to explain things for me. The exposition was very non-intrusive. Do you have any advice for new writers on how to accomplish the same effect? Good question.
Oh, that's really tough. It's like something that I kind of cultivated through like a long period of a lot of writing. But I think part of it is, again, like trusting your reader, not bringing things in until they become relevant. It's okay. I think there's this balance where you want your reader to have some questions in their mind. So it's okay if you don't explain everything all at once. At the same time, you want them to feel grounded enough that they don't feel lost. So I usually use some like little anchoring points where I have like metaphors that are world related that help people feel like it's a little bit more real, and also using sensory detail to make people feel like they're in that place. So even if they don't understand it, they still feel like they're in it. So what characters are seeing is a very common one that people use, but what people use less is what they're hearing, what they're smelling, what they're tasting. So that kind of helps like ground and anchor the reader while you're having like all this other stuff going on. And then just like let the reader trust that you're going to explain some of the things that you bring up as questions. So if you have a thing that you're bringing up in the beginning that feels like, oh, you know that the reader is going to be like, well, what is this? Like what kind of like system of magic is this? Or like, well, I don't really understand their government. Then you're going to kind of pick that thread up later. And it doesn't mean that you have to get it perfect on the first try. Some of this stuff means like you're going to go through beta readers and they're going to be like, hey, I didn't get this. And like, this was way too late when you explained it. Then you can move that up. So yeah, it's kind of a little bit of trial and error.
Yeah. I always think it's so interesting how after I read a book and then later I go into discussion of here's what I picked up, here's what you picked up, and there's always at least one thing that I'm like, how did I miss that? That was apparently a giant thing that I missed. And then, but there's always somebody who picks up on it, and I think that's almost one of the great things about books is going through and saying like, well, this is what I think, and then having somebody else go, no, 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 that was explained and it was this, and you're like, oh, okay, well, I thought it was this, and they're like, oh, I didn't realize it could be. And even with and this isn't a spoiler because I haven't gotten far enough to even know if this is true or not, but like in my head, I'm like, since Lynn was sort of made up of like a Frankenstein-y sort of person, I'm like, she's got to have some like Imola in her, that maybe like her eyes are Jovis's, love's eyes, and that's why he's like always going like, oh, I see something familiar in her, and I'm like, oh, what if it turns out she's got her body parts, and he's gonna be like, oh Jesus, what? And yeah. So yeah, I have a lot of questions that I want to ask, that I think, first of all, I think that there are answers that are coming and I don't want to spoil it for me. And secondly, I don't want to look stupid, because I'm pretty sure a lot of people would be like, that's already been answered, idiot. But I think that's also what's so great about, because you just keep reading and reading and going like, oh, what's this? And all these little pieces get revealed. Oh, so good. This is a great question. What's your revision process like? What's editing? Do your editors ever go like, no, you have to kill this person or
Oh
bring this
no.
person back?
They're not very prescriptive. They make suggestions and we kind of go from there. And sometimes I'm like, I mean, the vast majority of time, I'm like, yes, yeah, actually, like, I think all of the time I've been like, yeah, that's something that I need to fix. I think there's one thing that I had disagreed on how to fix, but I think that's like about it. But the revision process itself is like, it's it's a little bit terrible. I usually go through and like do a read through and then kind of make notes on what I think needs to be fixed. And then I make a checklist. I like checklists. And then I'll go and like put it from order of this is the most difficult, largest fix that I need to make, or like rewrites. So those go at the top, and then the littler fixes go at the bottom, because by the time I finish fixing the big things, then that may have changed things with the little things. So, and then I just kind of go from the top and like just check things off as I go. It's a lot easier once I get to the edit letter part of it, because it's a lot more clear for me than when I'm just working in my head. That's like the first pass revisions is like what I do until I'm happy with it. And then I send it to my editor, and then he sends me back a letter, and then I make a list based off of that. So yeah, it's like, I wish I could say that I could write it perfectly the first time. That would be wonderful. But unfortunately, no.
It would be awful, and we would all hate you. No one is allowed to write it perfectly the first time, and the edit process should be a nightmare, because it certainly is for me, and I want everyone else to suffer. So I did see in the chats, like people who are exactly like me, who are like, man, I'm gonna need like a refresher of what all happened. And first of all, Amy, good job, thank you, has a link to a recap of it. I would also say, I went back and just reread it because I have a really bad memory, so I went back and just like skimmed it the day before, because I was like, I can enjoy it. This is the fourth time I've read it. But there's also, if you go to Wikipedia, there's a little plot thing there. And there were a couple of websites that did like a read along, where they would say like, oh, we read, this first 2 weeks, and here's this and here's that. And so you can, if you look up, I don't remember the names of them, but if you just like Google like read along Bone Shard Daughter, you'll see like some websites that'll be like, and this was what happened. So if you want a fast recap, you don't want to have to read the whole thing. there's a couple of different ways to do that. Let's see. And okay, I'm reading, let's see, another question. I'm reading The Wheel of Time, trying to finish it before the show. And I think I saw on Twitter that you've read it. And I need to know, who is your favorite character on the series?
Oh gosh. Okay. So I haven't actually read the whole thing. I did one of those things where, okay, so I was obsessed with it when I was younger because it was the first like chunky epic fantasy series I read. But it did get to a point, I think there was like a lot of plot creep. So, and just like it went like a lot of different places. So I kind of like gave up, but I know I'm gonna have to go back to it at some point. But I think I'm probably gonna butcher her name, but I think Nynaeve was like Nynaeve. I don't remember. Nynaeve. I know how to pronounce her name, but I always liked her a lot. I just thought her character arc was so interesting, where she goes from like this nobody to somebody who's like extremely powerful, in the way that she handles that.
Love it. I have not watched it at all, but I'm going to put it on my list now. I wanted to show you guys something that I know I'm not going to be able to show it. I'm super gonna screw this up, but you know what, I'm going to try. So I didn't know this until I was recently actually inside my bookshop, and I think it was either Elizabeth or Vicky said something about how, some of these book covers come to life, right? And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. That sounds like you're all on drugs. And usually I'm the one on drugs. So turns out there are book covers that do come to life magically. And The Bone Shard Daughter is one of them. So if you have it, you can look. So I don't understand how this works, but there's this thing that you put on your phone. It's like a Google app, and part of the Google app is Google Lens. And Google Lens, like, you're supposed to be able to click on a thing and it'll be like, oh, would you like to check out this book? Would you like it? I don't know. It does stuff. But some books, I don't know if this is going to work or not. Let's see. Can you see this? Okay. So some books, when you put the cover in front of it, they will come to life. I don't know if y'all can see that or not, but do you see the book cover? Like, you can see it starts doing stuff. It starts playing music. You can flip it over. You can see different interviews. I went through the entire bookstore. I was looking at so many. I was like, look at this. People thought I was incredibly drunk because I was just looking at books through my phone. But it's crazy. I don't know. I thought it was exciting. Let's see. Dun, dun, dun. Okay, here's another good question. Are you going to give dragon slaying a go again?
Well, I mean, maybe metaphorically or or just in my books, because the only real life dragons I can think of are bearded dragons, and they're wonderful. So that would be the extent of it.
Love it. Let's see. I'm gonna go through. Dun, 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 dun. Dun, dun, dun. And what was your favorite book as a kid?
Oh gosh. It was either Watership Down, which I read ragged. I still have the copy that I bought at a yard sale for like 50 cents. And that, or The Blue Sword by Robin McKinley. It's like supreme wish fulfillment for like a young girl who's like awkward and shy, because there's the main character is like awkward and shy, and then she discovers she has like these amazing powers, and she gets this really cool horse and this cool cat and this amazing sword. So it's like my comfort read. It's I think it's like still, I think it's aged okay. It's the book that I will put on audio when I'm like in an unfamiliar place and having trouble sleeping, and it's like just so soothing to me.
Love it. I have never read that. But I also have my copy of Watership Down, which has been read to pieces, and weirdly enough, also bought at a garage sale. And it's right. I think it's there. I don't know. I can't point to it backward, but yep. Everybody has to have a copy of depressing rabbit books. And let's see, I thought maybe we could end on something more upbeat than depressing rabbit books, which is, what is something that you are excited about right now? Like maybe something you're watching or reading or something that's happening to you in life. What's something that's like just bringing you joy?
Oh, I'm really excited that I'm going to Paris in a couple weeks. This like trip has been like a really long time in the making. So, my husband and I never took a honeymoon. We're like, oh, we'll just like do that later. And then, we discovered that we had to do like IVF to have kids. So that was like, okay, well, we're gonna spend a bunch of money on that. and then that didn't work. And we had a trip planned to like Hawaii. So we canceled that to do IVF again. and then it worked. And then we were like, okay, we're gonna plan this trip to Paris and Amsterdam, and it's gonna be like our honeymoon / baby moon. So we're gonna do it while I'm pregnant. That was in April of 2020. so that got canceled because everybody was like, nobody's going anywhere. So we finally kind of like rescheduled. So we're not going to Amsterdam too now because I didn't want to leave my kid with my parents for too long. But we are going to Paris, and I am supremely excited because it's just been like such a long time coming. So hopefully it all goes smoothly.
Have you been there before, or is this the first time?
I have not. So I have not gone. My husband's not gone. This is the first time for either of us, so we're very excited. I'm meeting a friend over there for breakfast one morning, so that's going to be really great. We're going to go see the Eiffel Tower. We're going to go see the Louvre. We're going to do all that stuff.
Oh, that's awesome. I spent, I think, one night in Paris, and it's surprisingly not enough time to do. It was no, I think it was a day and a half. All of France, a day and a half. So I recommend do more than a day and a half, and actually go to the Eiffel Tower instead of just driving by and going, that seems close enough, and just speeding through and going to Scotland, which is I think where we were going. So I hope you have a wonderful, fantastic time. I am having a wonderful, fantastic time reading this advanced copy, and you guys are going to have a wonderful, fantastic time on the, let's see, what is it, the 23rd, right? When it's
the 23rd, yes.
On the 23rd, you guys, oh my gosh, oh, it's so good. As a matter of fact, as soon as we stop this, I'm going to go put a cat on my lap, and I'm going to finish tonight, because every single night my parents have been in town, and every single night I've been like, I really want to read this, but I also want to visit with you, but I can maybe do both. No, I can't do both. No. So now I get to do both. So thank you, Andrea, so much for joining us. Thank you to everybody who came tonight, even though it's a weird like Monday night. Thank you for showing up and supporting. And this has been, I had such a good time tonight.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a great conversation.
It was fun. I loved it. And if you're part of Fantastic Strangelings, I'm gonna open up discussion on sister songs soon. Sorry, I've kind of I fell a little bit behind, but I'm gonna get back on that probably tomorrow. And then you're gonna get what is it? Still Life comes out. I think we're shipping that in maybe 2 days, so that'll be later on. And then I just read like the I think I've got the December book and the January book, and they're so good. I want to tell you all about them, but I'm not going to, just in case we can't get them, because supply chain problems are a little weird. And I'm like, can I get that many? I want to make sure I can get them before I tell you about them, and so you don't get disappointed. But so thank you to everybody. Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you so much.
Oh my gosh. Well, go hug your baby and your kitties and your husband and enjoy.
Oh, I will.
Bon voyage.